Honorable Shri R.N. Ravi, the Honorable Governor of Tamil Nadu, Honorable Minister for Animal Husbandry, Fisheries and Information Broadcasting, Mr. Shri Murugan, Honorable Chairperson and Managing Trustee of the Sri Krishna Institution, Srimati Maldravi, Mr. Aditya, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am truly delighted to be in the midst of this very august gathering, and particularly young G20 ambassadors who've assembled here from different parts of India and different parts of Tamil Nadu. Let me first say that I've had the pleasure of working with the Honorable Governor of Tamil Nadu as a very young officer in my first posting. When I joined as sub-collector, he was then the SP. He was a very daring and a very dynamic officer, and who's gone on to do very legendary things in Kerala. But since then, people like me have aged with times, and he has gone only younger and younger and younger. So the Honorable Governor, Tamil Nadu is very fortunate to have a very dynamic governor like Mr. Ravi. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly delighted that Sri Krishna Institution has taken this initiative of holding the G20 Young Ambassadors Summit, because we are in the midst of several challenges across the world. The post-COVID era has seen about 200 million people fall below the poverty line. Almost 100 million people have lost their jobs. There is a global recession going on. 1/3 of the world is under recession according to IMF. 75 countries of the world are facing a global debt crisis. There's a crisis of climate action and climate finance. And if we are not able to accelerate the pace of climate action to 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2050, we'll all be extinct. And therefore, this is one of the biggest challenges before us. And on top of all that, we've had a challenge of the financial collapse of banks in the United States of America, witnessed through the Silicon Valley Bank. And we are seeing a war going on in Europe for the last over a year and a half, and bringing in huge geopolitical tensions, impacting food, fuel, fertilizer, breaking down global value chains. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, India is taken over the presidency of G20 during very turbulent times, time of great upheaval in the global economy. But every challenge is an opportunity, and to our mind, this is a huge opportunity for India. In the past, India has always responded to an agenda set by the developed world. This is the first time that India is setting an agenda for the entire world. G20 is important because it accounts for about 85% of the global GDP. It accounts for about 75% of the global trade. It accounts for 90% of the patents, and it accounts for 2/3 of the world's population. And as the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has said, that India's presidency will be very inclusive, will be very decisive, will be very ambitious and action-oriented. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, during the last 3.5 months, we've held almost about 40 different meetings, and each one of them, we've tried to be ambitious and decisive and set a trend for setting a new discourse in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, India's presidency is critical because a good presidency is incumbent upon 3 critical factors. And let me dwell on some of them. The 3 critical factors is the political and the developmental narrative that we set out for the rest of the world, which I'll dwell on. Secondly, it is the kind of priorities that we spell out. And thirdly, how well we organize this, and I'll briefly dwell on each one of them. The development and the political narrative is that we are a democracy, we are the motherhood of all democracy. The democracy has existed in India from the time of the Gitas. We've seen this embedded during each one of our periods and regimes, and when actually Alexander came from Greek, and though Europe's talk about Greece as a great democracy, but when Alexander came to India, he discovered that actually democracy had existed in India from before, and that it had a very vibrant form of institutions of democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important because of the development narrative that even in a democracy, we elect through a very vast electoral system where over 1 billion people vote, and voting takes place even in Gir Wildlife Sanctuary, where there are 40 tigers but only 2 voters, or going to Siachen where there are for a few javans, electronic machines are taken, and therefore it's a very vibrant, lively democracy, and that we have a leader who's been elected through a democratic process, and very few democracies have a leader who's got elected twice and still has a very high approval rating of over 70%. So when the leaders of the world meet on September 9th and 10th, you'll be led by a leader who has a very mass support. But the development narrative is very important, and that development narrative is that India has been able to digitize its economy in a very big way. It built identity for over 1 billion people. It has 1.4 billion people have a digital identity. During 2015 and 17, we were able to create 500 million bank accounts. And during that period, 55% of the bank accounts across the world were opened in India. Every second bank account was opened in India. And then we ensured that there were 900 to 1 billion mobile phones, and everybody uses a mobile phone to do his digital fast payments within seconds. So today we do about 11x more fast payments than what Europe and USA do together, and 4x of what China does. So India has actually been a state which is #1 in data usage. India is the #1 mobile user. Its cost of lowest data is the cheapest in the world, and it has made the biggest digital transformation in the world, ladies and gentlemen. But India's development agenda is because in the last 8 years, we've built about 30 million houses. And 30 million houses is like providing a house to every single Australian. We've provided about 110 million toilets, which is like providing a toilet to every single person in Germany, the entire population of Germany. And we've been able to provide piped water to 243 million citizens of India, which is like providing piped water to every single citizen of Brazil. And we've been able to build 55,000 kilometers of roads, which is like providing the earth with 1.5 times of the earth, the full diameter of the earth, the road across it. And therefore, if you look at India's transformation during the COVID period, we were able to give vaccines to 2.2 billion people of India, which was totally paperless, cashless, and was entirely digital. And therefore, we've ensured that we build up digital public infrastructure, which is totally digital in nature. And that is why we provide a health insurance to 500 million people of India. 500 million people means twice the size of America. And that is that I can be from Tamil Nadu traveling to Bihar, or I can be from UP and traveling to Kerala. I'll take my health insurance with me. So what you see is a massive transformation in terms of size and scale. And as the Bank of International Settlement has said, that what India has achieved in 8 years would have taken normally India 50 years to achieve. We've achieved in 8 years what would have taken 50 years to achieve. And that is because of the vast amount of digital transformation and the infrastructure that we've built. So that is the developmental and the political narrative for G20. And when India hosts the G20 presidency. The second is the content and the priority that we spell out. And the priority for us is that India is aiming to accelerate the process of inclusive, sustainable, resilient growth, because growth is important for the world. If we are not able to push for growth for the leaders of the world, 1/3 of the world which is living in poverty will not be able to grow. And therefore, inclusive, resilient, sustainable growth is critical. It is critical because in the post-COVID era, vast segments of people have been impacted on learning outcome, on health outcomes, on nutrition. The SDG goals of 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, instead of progressing, have regressed. And therefore, you need a new accelerated action plan for sustainable development goals so that the entire world can benefit from India's leadership. And thirdly, we are pushing for climate action, climate finance, and what the Prime Minister has termed as the Lifestyle for Sustainability, LIFE program. And all this means that the developed world, which had committed to $100 billion a year in 2009 at Copenhagen and has not lived up to it, should provide that financial support. But more than that, large sums of monies are available with private finance, which is not able to flow in because the World Bank and IMF were designed for another era. They were designed for post-World War II, the post-Bretton Woods period, and they need to be redesigned for an era of climate change and sustainable development goals. And therefore, our aim is that reformed multilateralism is important during G20. And fifthly, digital transformation and digital public infrastructure based on the unique Indian model of the Indian narrative is important. And how do we transform lives of citizens across the world? I gave you the story of the digital transformation of India. If you look around the world, you'll find 4 billion people of the world do not have a digital identity. 2.5 billion people do not have a bank account. 133 countries of the world do not have a fast payment at all. And therefore, they'll never be able to use digital education, digital agriculture, digital health. And therefore, the Indian model needs to be taken to the world, to the south of the world, to the people and to the countries which have not progressed in the last few years. And that is our objective. And lastly, the Prime Minister has spelled out women-led development as very important, as one of India's key priority. Because in India today, the last NFHS survey has shown that there are 1,022 women to 1,000 men. There are more women than men in India. And women are very dynamic leaders, like the chairperson of the Shri Krishna Institution, who's a very dynamic lady, and who has driven this institution. We have many more women who are leaders. And if you put them into leadership position, you'll transform not only health, education, you'll bring in a huge amount of digital and financial inclusion. When we started the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, opening bank accounts for women, in India, only 17% of the women had bank accounts. Today, almost 80% of the women have bank accounts in India. In a short while, we've jumped from 17% to 80%. That has been the power of financial inclusion. And that is what we need to take across the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are our key priorities. And I come to the third point, which is about how are we conducting the G20. Unlike most countries which do their G20 in one city or one place, the Prime Minister was very clear. His vision was that instead of making this a G20 presidency for the leaders, we'll convert this into a people's presidency. People of every city, every panchayat, every district will participate in this G20 and understand what G20 is about. And therefore, he said, take this out of Delhi and Mumbai. And today we are doing G20. We are holding over 220 meetings in 59 cities of India. 59 cities of India. And our objective is that each one of these cities get transformed through better drainage, sewage, solid waste. We are involving the states so that these states can then push their culture, their handicraft, their one district, one product, many other things. And also we are pushing for millets as an alternative crop to rice and wheat. And because millets have great iron, calcium, protein, are less water consuming. And therefore, during this period, we want states to emerge as great brands. We want districts to transform themselves. And I'm truly glad that Shri Krishna Institution has used this opportunity to make this into a young and global brand ambassadors movement. This is a remarkable feat by the Shri Krishna Institution, so that to assemble so many young people. Young people are important because they are going to change the destiny of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a young nation. If you look at India's population, over 1 billion people are less than the age of 35. And even in 2047, by the time we become 100, India's average age will still be 29. We'll still be the youngest nation in the world. We will be supplying almost 35% of the workforce to the world. The youngest nation supplying 35% of the workforce to the world. And therefore, if India is to transform and grow at rapid rates, very high rates, to become a $5 trillion or a $10 trillion economy, it can only be on the back of young people like all of you. And therefore, I'm truly glad that this is a G20 Young Brand Ambassador Summit. And that's why I really thought that this would be a great opportunity to meet, interact, and actually tell you what the objectives of G20 are. G20 is unique for India. G20 is a great people's movement, and G20 is really an opportunity for young people to benefit out of this movement. And therefore, I really congratulate Shri Krishna Institution, its chairperson, its young trustee, Mr. Aditya, and all the other trustees who have assembled here. And I congratulate the city of Coimbatore for hosting this G20 Young Brand Ambassadors Meet. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.